/ask page. So I met this guy through the boyfriend of my sister. The day we met, he was interested in me, and after a while of hanging out, we developed mutual feelings and hung out more often than usual. He texted every day and never failed to say good morning and good night, and would update me on what he was doing and where he was going. It lasted for a month, and I took him to my favourite spot in the city, and I accidentally said, "I love you." He was surprised by it and said, "Why me?" For 2 weeks, everything was fine, and we made love, but a few weeks after that, I felt like he was slipping away. There were times he'd say stuff like he wants to find a pretty girlfriend. He'd share his attraction to other women. He started to get mad easily. He wouldn't text me anymore. He'd say he's busy with work. Then he stopped texting me every day, texted every week, until now he's texting me every time he wants to have sex. The guy is 4 years younger than me, so I understand. But he does sweet stuff with me when we're together, but keeps me a secret with his friends, even to my sister's boyfriend who introduced us in the first place. Wow, I've got lots to say about this one. Okay, so the first thing is you've been absolutely love-bombed. So what that is basically when you meet a guy and he uses lavish displays of affection that are unsustainable to draw you into the relationship and manipulate you into having a relationship with him. In fact, he behaves so perfectly, it all feels too good to be true. Now, there's a part of that happens when we meet someone new anyway. So I talk about this term limerence. And if you want to know more about limerence, there's a lady called Dorothy Tenov that you can... who's written a book called Love and Limerence that you can read about in Limerence in detail. It's a fabulous book. But basically, there's this process you go through in a relationship called limerence. And it's where nature kind of conspires for us to bond and couple up. So it's normal. Hi, Roma. It's normal to want to spend every waking moment together. That's normal. But there's something here that's not sustainable. You know, good morning every morning, good night, updating you through the day on when he's up, where he's up to, etc., etc. And the thing is, it's natural that this would sort of, fall away with time. But, it sort of is a gradual dropping away of this, this really intense connection. It doesn't just chop off. Now, it's interesting that you said to him, "I love you," by accident. And that tells me a lot. It tells me that you're very caught up in the feelings. Now, I'll talk about this in a minute, but that saying "I love you" like that was like his green light. So what basically you did was you said to him, "You've got me." And that then told him, "She loves me." And guys who are like this, who are abusive, and this one's a Mr. Unavailable. Mr. Unavailable is highly insecure. That's why he said, "Why me?" That popped out. Why me? Why do you love me? Because I don't feel like I'm lovable. So that's his stuff. Your stuff is you got caught up in the moment and you said, "I love you." Now, I think you need to read my blog post, Is It Love? Hi, Mary. Is it love or limerence? Because that blog post talks a lot about that beginning space and the fact that you can start to mistake a relationship as happening and feeling good, that just because it feels good, that it is good. So what's happened is this guy is actually a Mr. Unavailable and he's actually abusive. So he has thought, yippee, green light, I've got it. I don't have to be Mr. Perfect anymore and I don't have to try. And the thing that's really toxic about that is you don't realize what's going on because, of course, he doesn't have a sign on his forehead saying, "I'm abusive, I'm Mr. Unavailable." What happens is you're emotionally connected And then he disconnects. So not only do you have this really addictive memory of this wonderful time you've had together, you then start questioning yourself, why has he disconnected with me? What's going on? Why would this happen? And so, of course, you find yourself in a space where you're second guessing yourself, you're over functioning, you're thinking a lot about the relationship, and you start to get drawn into this toxic vortex and toxic pattern. So rather than I suspect that you've told me that because you're worried by saying I love you, you scared him off. No, you didn't scare him off, not at all. If he had been a healthy guy, he would have said to you, wow, that's a lot for me. This is how I feel. He wouldn't have just completely changed like that. People who handle your feelings with care don't do that. What you did was you gave a very toxic guy a green light to start manipulating you because he thought, good, I've got you. So when you're with him and he talks about other women, so he says, I want to be with a pretty girlfriend. I want to, what was the other thing he said? Notices other women. That he talk about how he's attracted to other women. Well, that's about him telling you you're not good enough. That's about him criticizing you. He's actually saying, you're not pretty, I want a pretty girlfriend. And not only that, I'm going to lead you into thinking you're my girlfriend just enough to keep you hooked in that there might be a possibility that I might change my mind. But at the same time, I'm going to tell you, no, I want a pretty girlfriend. So you're not really a girlfriend. So what are you? So he's playing games with your feelings and it's not nice. It's absolutely toxic and abusive. So why does he do all this? He does this to keep himself safe. Remember I said the clue you gave me was when you said I love you, he said, why me? This is a guy with no inner confidence. So in order for him to keep control of the relationship, he has to play Mr. Unavailable. If you scroll back, I'm talking to the person that's written me this question. If you scroll back in the newsfeed and you go to my Friday night Facebook Lives, which we're actually saving and we're going to make into a package for you. But if you go back to Tuesday night, you will see I talked about I think it was my second Facebook Live, I talked about the different types of toxic men. And this is a classic Mr. Unavailable. So of those of you who are interested in an example of this would be a good Facebook Live to watch from the beginning. So basically the reason he does this is he wants to keep himself safe. So he keeps control of the relationship. And because he doesn't feel good enough, what he wants to do is what I call being an international man of mystery, but he's in suburbia. So he's telling himself he's a bit of a James Bond, you know the story of James Bond. He's got the girl, but there's a mystery, and will they be together or won't they be together? Will he say he loves her? Won't he? But then again, there's that other woman over there, and give me what does he say? A martini, shaken but not stirred, as he's gazing across the room. And that's what this guy's doing. He's pumping up his own ego by talking about all the women he could have and creating a bevy around him. That's what he's doing, and that's why he does this. And so what he does is he reels you in and he cuts you off. So he reels you in, he calls you, you have sex, and then probably straight after sex he says, you know what, there's this blonde at the office. So in other words, it was good enough for me to come and see you, but not good enough to stop me thinking about other women, So it's very cruel, very, very cruel. What's also cruel about this is you've got this beginning of the relationship that was so good. Then he's treating you so appallingly. But at the same time, you're seeing him in public being very nice to everybody. In fact, your sister, this can be a really horrible syndrome that you can fall into. It's called the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome. Remember the story of Dr. Jekyll? He was this wonderful doctor, so kind, wanted to help people, and he thought he could come up with this wonderful potion that would make people well again. And of course, every time he took the potion, he turned into Mr. Hyde, this horrible, horrible person that was going out murdering people and all the rest of it. And then the potion would wear off and he'd be the beautiful Dr. Jekyll again. And that's kind of like what abusive men are like. I worked with a girl once who used to call it devil indoors, angel outdoors. So this idea that your sister and her boyfriend probably know this guy is a really lovely guy. They probably wouldn't have introduced him to you if they thought he would treat you like this. So when you go to them and you say, did you know that this guy is, only calling me up for sex, criticising me by talking about other women, only wants to be with me to have sex, and kind of reeled me in and now is cutting me off and he's being really horrible to me and I don't know what to think, that they'd probably look at you and go, really? Wow, gosh, he's so nice. He's such a nice guy. I would never think he'd be like that. So can you see that how crazy making that is? So you then, if you don't have this education of knowing that this is a toxic technique, you're going to say to yourself, what's wrong with me? Why does he treat me like this? Why was everything so good? What have I done wrong to make it go like this? When it's nothing to do with you and everything to do with him. This behaviour, you may well have made mistakes in the relationship, but I'm sorry, this behaviour is coming from him and it is abusive and it is not selective. So if he meets another girl, it is highly likely he will treat her in exactly the same way because this is about him managing his own anxiety. So really what you need to understand is if you keep responding to him, so at the moment, he rings you when he wants sex and then he's saying horrible things to you. If you allow this to continue, what you are doing is you are teaching him how to treat you. Because you're saying, it's fine with me. I love you. And I want you to love me back. So I'll do anything. When really all you're teaching him is, well, she's a soft touch and I can manipulate her for a bit on the side until I find somebody else that I can have fun with. Or maybe he's got many girls going like this. You don't know. So you need to stand your ground because he's not going to learn to manage his behaviour unless you take a stand and actually call your boundaries about this and say, this is not okay for me. I don't want to be with you like this. We either have a proper relationship where you tell my sister and her boyfriend, who is your friend, that we are together, or we are not doing this. Have a recognition that yes, it's not possible to text a zillion times a day. That's the beginning of the relationship. However, you don't go from texting 4 or 5 times a day to not texting at all. That's not normal. So it's important for you to recognise that in order for him to have any self-reflexivity whatsoever, you need to call a boundary and say, this is not okay with me. And if he chooses to go, then he wasn't worth it in the first place. Because if he's saying to you, I want to have a relationship with you on my terms, not worrying about the impact on you, then he's not a nice person. And I suspect he's not a person that's going to handle your heart with care. And is this who you want to be with? You made a really interesting comment. He's 4 years younger than me, so I understand. And I thought, I don't like that. Because even young men, even little boys who have their first girlfriend in primary school don't necessarily behave like this. This is mean. It is nasty. And if the sort of guys that you're mixing with are in groups that are doing what I call marathon dating and comparing scorecards, then they're not nice guys and you need to get yourself away from them, because otherwise you're going to find yourself doing the same thing over and over again. What I'm wondering about is your self-confidence that you're allowing this to happen to you. There's something about you buying into this not good enough, buying into this whole thing of and there's that part of you that if you're not educated about all this, it's very easy to get caught up in it. And I have worked with very intelligent women who have been in abusive relationships like this for years, who have come to me and we have drawn the cycle on the whiteboard. We have gone over the relationship. We have dissected it to, the nth degree, and they've come to a real understanding. And they've said to me, "Oh my God, Elizabeth, why didn't I know this?" Like really upset and frustrated, because often they've gone to other counsellors who are not relationship trained, who sit there and say, "And how did you feel when he did that?" So it's very important that, if you're looking for help, that you go to the right place, but also that you have some compassion with yourself, that you've been caught up in this toxic vortex. And look, we've all had it happen to us. We've all had it happen to us. But it's really important that you say to yourself, "I'm not going to let this happen to me again." Because in all of this is, if you don't have good self-confidence, you won't have the confidence to trust your own instinct and trust your own sense of understanding of toxic relationships to say, "This is not okay for me. I'm not okay with this anymore." And stick to it. You'll get drawn in again and again, because when he says to you, "I like that other girl. I want a pretty girlfriend," you'll buy into that as really affirming your own self-language that you have with yourself, that you're not good enough. And it starts to create what I call an induction, where he pumps up his self-confidence by criticizing you. And because those words resonate with you in some way and feed into your, "Hi Samantha," feed into your sense of lack of self-confidence, you start to get this induction happening that's can be very hard to break away from. Because if you've perhaps grown up with highly critical parents who have criticized you, you've got this self-talk going on, and you're used to having a meaningful relationship with a significant other, either mum or dad, that creates this emotional landscape that's highly critical. You then get a partner who's highly critical. It's the toxic pattern repeating again, but because you're used to it, it feels safe. So there's something about, you've got to slow yourself down. You talk about at the beginning of this relationship, within 2 weeks, you were professing love to each other and all that kind of thing. Well, that's too soon. That's limerence. That's not love, that's limerence. You need to slow yourself down, because unfortunately you've been caught in this space of feeling, because it feels good, it must be good. And unfortunately, life's not like that. And unfortunately, I suspect your sister and her boyfriend have introduced you to this guy because his public face is very nice and they thought he'd be lovely for you. But the trouble is, they don't know what he's like in a romantic relationship, and neither do you. So you need to say, "Good, he's been introduced to me. So on the surface, he's a great guy. Now I need to get to know what he's like in a romantic relationship," and that takes time. So I need to slow myself down, and I'm going to blow my own trumpet here because I don't know anybody else that's doing what I'm doing. I need to come to Elizabeth Facebook Lives. Maybe I need to do some more detailed work with her. I've got some ebooks at the moment you can read. I've got How to Disarm a Love Bomb, which is about love bombing, but I've also got Stop Kissing Toads, which is coming, which is my book, which is all about avoiding toxic men. And you need to do some work on yourself and your own education so that you understand what's going on, so that you can then take steps to make better choices for yourself. That's what needs to happen. So, and you need to work on building up your self-confidence. And I'm looking at how I can, once I get this sort of work up and going, I'm looking at how I might even start a second group focused specifically on self-confidence, so that you girls can go over there and do some work that may step into, "Hi Wendy, how are you?" Might step into relationships, but will be really focused on self-confidence. So I hope this has really helped you. He definitely is a toxic toad. He definitely needs boundaries called on him. And he definitely needs more women to be empowered to do exactly the same thing. because unfortunately he's clearly grown up with some values around women that are very disrespectful, and it feels like he treats women like objects, and the only way that's going to change for him is if you take a stand. And if he decides he doesn't want to be with you anymore, well then sayonara baby, and move on and find yourself someone healthy that you can have a healthy intimate relationship with. And then what I really want you to do is I really hope you'll keep working with me, because we're going to move on and talk about the challenges of being in a healthy relationship. In fact, one of the books that's in my head is actually going to be written around that, and being in a long-term healthy relationship. And those of you that know me well know I've been in a relationship for a long time, so this one's going to be really written from my heart, because it's really going to be written around my experience. And they're the things that you need to also be aware of, because if you meet a healthy guy, you need to be able to recognize it. Because Prince Charming's not perfect. We know that. And you need to be able to recognize the difference between a mistake in a relationship and toxic behavior patterns that repeat and repeat and repeat. So I hope that's been really helpful to you.